Hello, fellow Commander enthusiasts. As the title promises, I recently looked at every single creature that could function as your commander, and I wanted to show some of the more interesting ones that I found. This video is meant to showcase some of the more niche and out there legendary creatures that Magic has produced over the years. Since this list is a very personal one, I chose to exclude some cards. Firstly, I didn't include any partner commanders since I believe they aren't really mono-colored and they also need to be evaluated in pairs, so maybe they deserve their own video. Secondly, and maybe a bit more controversially, I elected not to include any Universes Beyond cards for different reasons. On one hand, I think those are relatively recent and thus still in the collective memory. Everyone who is interested in Universes Beyond cards know about those commanders. Also, they mostly come in pre-built commander decks that already showcase how to use them. And lastly, and most importantly, I just don't like them, so they don't spark my creativity. If you enjoy Universes Beyond, I'm beyond happy for you. But I don't, and this is my list after all. Now, with all of those disclaimers out of the way, go grab a cup of tea, sit back and enjoy some good old second screen entertainment. Let's get this list going with Balan the Wandering Knight, a 4-mana 3/3 cat knight. Cat is a very interesting creature type, as in it is very tribal focused. Cat is also interesting because there is the tribe of the Leonin cats, which very much care about equip abilities. So maybe Balan could be the commander that you want to play if you really like cats, but you also want equipments. The ability, of course, is extremely powerful, considering there is equipments that are cheap to play, but extremely difficult to equip, like Colossus Hammer, for example. Next on the list, Baldin Sentry Herdmaster. It's a 6-mana 0/7 that says, as long as it's your turn, each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So far, so not unusual, I would say. We've seen this a lot, but we've seen this mostly on defender typo or tribal decks. This specifically doesn't care about defender as an ability. Also, what I found particularly interesting about this was the line of text: up to 100 target creatures each get +0/+X. This just reminded me of the 100-handed one, a card from an older set that also said has reach and can block an additional 99 creatures each combat. These abilities might be silly and it might as well say all your creatures, but I think Commander is the place where you can drop this card and everybody just reads the card and goes 100. So yeah, typical Commander card, maybe not super good, but very fun in my opinion. Bennie Bracks, Zoologist. Note that Bennie is an elf druid on a white creature. Elf druid is probably the most common type combination in Magic's existence, maybe besides human soldier, but it's very uncommon on a white creature. Why I specifically chose Bennie is not just the creature type though, but because I think Convoke on a commander is extremely potent. Commanders go back to the command zone, obviously, every time they get killed or exiled, but they get more expensive. Convoke specifically negates that commander tax, as we commonly call it, because you can just tap 2 more creatures and you can still cast Bennie Bracks, most likely, for free. Also, having card advantage stapled onto your commander is very nice because it's such a reliable source of card advantage then. Brigid, or Brigid, Hero of Kinsbaile, is a 4-mana 2/3 Kytheon archer. 2 very fringe creature types, so maybe for those of you who don't want to play slivers and humans and elves. It has first strike and it has an ability where it taps to deal 2 damage to each attacking or blocking creature target player controls. Two things about this. Archers is a very, very fringe creature type, but there is a good commander in Ohabi, which makes it so each archer you control untaps every untap step, and it lets you draw whenever an archer deals damage to a creature. And also, this could go very well in a deck that forces your opponent to attack. This works very, very well with goading, where this doesn't care that those creatures are specifically attacking you, they just need to be attacking creatures. So also maybe a bit of diplomacy going on. Next on the list for maybe those groups that don't care about friendships. Celestial Kirin, 4-mana 3/3, flying. Kirin Spirit. Kirin, obviously irrelevant creature type spirit, kind of relevant. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, destroy all permanents with that spell's converted mana cost. I think this is not super unknown, but for those of you who are uninitiated, this is not a fair card whatsoever. Not that it specifically says destroy all permanents, not non-land permanents, which means usually what you do is pair it with a 0-mana spirit or arcane spell to nuke every land in existence and ruin the fun for everyone. So if you're a stacks player, or you just like spirits and hate lands, maybe this is a card for you. Next on the list, I want to point out two very similar commanders. One is Cho-Manno, Revolutionary, 4-mana 2/2, human rebel. Human, very relevant. Rebel, maybe not so much, but maybe later on in the list I will make it a bit more relevant. Line of text says prevent all damage that would be dealt to Cho-Manno Revolutionary. This is not an insanely powerful line of text, but it is kind of unique. Obviously, it makes for a very good blocker, but there's probably some shenanigans that you can do with it. I didn't find it. Maybe you will. Kind of similar, but in my opinion, way better, is the bird, the soldier, the legend himself, Commander Eesha. Or herself, I don't actually know. It's a 4-mana 2/4 flying protection from creatures. Protection from creatures is an absurd and, in my opinion, kind of unfun line of text. Because remember, this mostly means it's unblockable, it won't take any damage from creatures. This could be a very interesting take on Voltron Commander, because one of the harder keywords to get on your commander is unblockable. There's Commander's Plate, which is very expensive. Like, just physically buying the card is expensive, and that's obviously a better card, but having it stapled onto your commander themselves is super interesting. You can just give it double strike and go. It notably, of course, doesn't protect it from instants or sorcery, but remember, it's way easier to just have a status quo that is super good for you. Having an unblockable commander is just insane. And then every once in a while having to react to an instant or sorcery, to a board wipe or a spot removal spell by playing something like Loren's Escape. On the other hand, if your commander has hexproof, that's very nice, but it doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't progress your game plan, and then you would need to get unblockable on your commander, which is, again, harder to do than indestructible, hexproof, protection type effects like that. Crovax Ascendant Hero is a 6-mana human noble, human notable, creature type noble, not notable. It's a 4/4, and since Crovax is a very old character, the effect is symmetrical. Other white creatures get +1/+1. So, remember, you might be helping out an opponent that just happens to play white tokens. Non-white creatures get -1/-1. Also symmetrical, but I doubt in a Crovax Ascendant Hero deck you would be playing non-white creatures. The last ability is pay 2 life, return Crovax to its owner's hand. This is notable to me for 2 reasons. First of all, you get to circumvent spot removal and thus kind of skip out on commander decks. Crovax will almost always cost you 6 mana, and you'll be playing from your hand most of the time. Also, in mono white, it can be quite rare to find effects that just let you pay life or lose life. You can just hold priority and pay this as many times as you can to lose, let's say, 38 life in a turn. What do you do with that? I don't know, but get creative. Next on the list, and a spoiler warning, at first you might think this works perfectly with Crovax, but it doesn't. Darien, King of Kjeldor, 6 mana 3/3 human soldier, the other ubiquitous type combination. The line of text on this card reads, whenever you're dealt damage, you may create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Notably, Crovax loses life, or sorry, you pay life, that is not damage dealt. Still, this is an insane line of text. Just imagine having an Ancient Tomb out, and every time you tap Ancient Tomb, you not only get 2 mana, which is insane in and of itself, you also get 2 white 1/1 soldier tokens. There's so many pain lands, and there's so many ways to deal damage to yourself. Just go ahead, get creative, get mad, and try to break this card. Next on the list, probably a way worse card and a lot more tame, is Djeru with Eyes Open. 5 mana 4/3 vigilance, and we really only care about the first paragraph of text. It says, when Djeru enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Planeswalker card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle. This is very unique. Having a Planeswalker tutor on a possible commander means you can circumvent the commanders can't be your commander rule if your table doesn't allow you to rule 0 a white commander for any reason. Second line of text is kind of irrelevant. Really, this is a cool way to have a hidden Planeswalker commander in white. A lot less tame, maybe not very good, but so much more interesting. 8.5 tails, 2 white mana, legendary Fox Cleric. Fox, not very relevant as it's mostly a Kamigawa creature type. Cleric, very good creature type. This 2/2 reads, for 2 mana, 1 and a white. Target permanent you control gains protection from white until end of turn. Why would we want protection from white until end of turn? Well, because for 1 generic mana, we can turn target spell or permanent to white until end of turn. Now this card functions perfectly on its own. For 3 mana, you can make this unblockable against 1 creature, or you can turn it into a perfect blocker. But especially during the early days of Magic, there was a lot of color hate. White hated everything that was black, black hated everything that was white. So maybe if you don't run this as your commander, but in a color matters type deck, you can combine it with cards like Stromgeld Cabal, which just taps to counter a white spell. You just have 1 mana, tap, lose 1 life, counter target spell on a stick on a creature, and there's lots of effects like this. White used to be hated on by black so much. There is tap, destroy target white creature on a 3 mana black card. Get crazy, get wild. I know this doesn't work necessarily as a commander, but in the 99 this can be a very potent and super fun creative creature card. Next on the list, Fortune Loyal Steed, a 3 mana 2/4 beast mount. When it enters, you scry 2. Whenever Fortune attacks while it is saddled, at the end of combat you get to exile it and 1 creature that saddle it until you get to exile it and they come back immediately. Now, of course, this means you get to blink stuff. Blinking is very common. It's a very fun type of deck. Why I pointed out this card specifically is its saddle ability. For those who don't know, saddle is like crew, as in you get to tap as many creatures as you want. As long as they have power 1 or more, you get to saddle this creature. And then obviously the effect happens, right? Whenever it attacks while it's saddled, exile it and a creature that saddled it. Now you could use this just for its blinking, which would be fine on its own. But remember that there is some cards that really care about becoming tapped. For example, Sandwell, who gets to look at the top 6 cards of your library and you get to cast a vehicle or artifact creature spell from among them whenever it becomes tapped. Or think Magda, which cares about tapped dwarves. So the reason that Saddle is so good is that you don't have to just stop at one creature. You can just tap all your 7/7 dwarves maybe, and then untap them next turn, get 7 treasure tokens from your Magda. Saddle, really powerful, and sometimes overlooked that tapping a lot of creatures can be super beneficial to you. General Jarkeld, super old card from Ice Age. It's a 4 mana card, 1/2 in stats, already off to a very bad start. It taps to switch the blocking creatures of 2 target attacking creatures. So you target attacking creatures, so mostly your creatures, but it could also be someone else's creatures. And then you switch the blockers. The defense must remain legal, so you can't block a flying bird with a non-flying creature. And it can only be used after the blockers are chosen, obviously, and before damage is dealt. For those who might be a little confused, they just didn't really care about creature types on Legends back then. This is a human soldier, again, a very ubiquitous creature type combination, and also a very good by extension. Getting to swap blockers is a super fun thing to do, especially since you don't need to do it on your own creatures. You can play a bit of diplomacy and have someone at your mercy. Next on the list, another very old character, but a newer card is Gerrard Capashen. 5 mana, 3/4. Now, obviously, Gerrard is a legendary character in the lore of Magic the Gathering, and whenever a character like this gets a card, we hope it's super powerful, like the Urza card that we got. This card, I think, just falls flat on its face. First ability, at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life for each card in target opponent's hand. Second ability, 4 mana, tap target creature, activate only if Gerrard is attacking. I think this is a very bad card. I still wanted to point it out because the first ability is kind of unique, right? It cares about cards in target opponent's hand. So I know maybe after an upheaval this is interesting, or against one blue player that insists that having 20 cards is super fun for everyone. It's a wacky card. It's probably not very good, but maybe you see something in it that I don't. Next on the list, the next spirit card that is just very, very unfun. Hokori, Dust Drinker. 4 mana, 2/2 spirit. Lands don't untap during their controller's unstep. Already very unfun. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a land he or she controls. So kind of Winter Orb, but on a commander creature. If you hate your playgroup, maybe you can bring this. How do we break it? I don't know. I think I found a very, very innocuous artifact that is super underplayed, very fringe, that is good with this. It's called Soul Ring. It's a 1 mana artifact, and it's kind of, it's okay, I would say. It taps for 2, and I think I kind of broke Hokori, or rather, I broke Soul Ring with Hokori. Yeah. Maybe you haven't heard of Soul Ring yet. It's a decent card. Please ban it. Please, for the love of God, ban Soul Ring. If you hate Soul Rings just as much as me, play Kataki. War's Wage. 2 mana, 2/1 spirit, again Kamigawa, by the way. I noticed that there's 2 sets that really stand out to me as super creative and cool legendary creatures. And that is Kamigawa and the new Ixalan set. I think both of those are excellent and have very cool, unique effects. Kataki fucking hates treasures. Kataki hates Soul Rings. And Kataki hates every artifact in its existence. All artifacts have the ability, at the beginning of your upkeep, sack it, unless you pay 1. I think it's totally fair to hate on treasures. Treasures are kind of a blight on recent commanders. Or commander decks. And yeah, remember, it's okay to hate treasures. If you do, play Kataki. Kentaro, the Smiling Cat. 2 mana, again Kamigawa. I think this is probably also personal bias, but I think it's just a very unique ability. It's a human samurai. Human good, samurai, It has Bushido 1. We don't even need to read it. Bushido is very bad in most cases. The ability, however, is very unique. You may pay X rather than pay the mana cost for samurai spells you play, where X is, of course, the spell's converted mana cost, or mana value as it would now be worded. I couldn't really think of a way to break this. As a commander, this is kind of useless because, right, you get to kind of skip out on color requirements, but in a mono-white commander, you shouldn't have problems casting your spells. You also can't really reduce it. Maybe there's something with X spells that I didn't think of, but yeah, maybe in your 3, 4, 5 color commander deck that cares about samurai, you can play this and then never worry about mana pips and mana costs ever again. Next on the list, 4 mana, Kwende, Pride of Femeref. It's a human, it's a knight. Great creature types. It's a 2/2, not very great. It has double strike. Okay, that's great. And creatures you control with first strike have double strike. Jesus. Double strike is definitely one of the more powerful keywords out there. I'd say it's not quite unblockable, but actually maybe it is. It is a very strong creature type. But it always comes at a hefty price when it comes to stats on creatures. First strike, way more ubiquitous and very easy to find on creatures. In addition to that, first strike creatures often have higher attack than they do toughness because it's, very advantageous to have high attack when you have first strike. So, I don't know, I think this is just a very strong effect that you can put in your decks or maybe build a deck around it. Kytheon, Hero of Akros, a 1 mana 2/1 human soldier. And of course, you all know this is Gideon. So it has the ability to turn into a planeswalker. A planeswalker whose backside is very tame, of course. But I wanted to point out the +2 ability, which forces target creature an opponent controls to attack Gideon during its next turn available. This to me was interesting because goading specifically doesn't let the creature attack you or a planeswalker you control, which, for the most part is good, but sometimes you just want creatures to come at you. Lyn Civi, Defiant Hero, a 3 mana 1/3 Rebel Legend. By the way, just having the creature type Legend sounds so much cooler than just being a legendary creature. Lyn Civi is a tutor on a stick. For X and tap, you get to search your library for a rebel card that costs X or less, and then put it into play. Into play, not just hand, into play. And then for 3, you get to put target rebel from your graveyard to the bottom of your library. This is maybe a bit controversial. I think tutors are kind of against the spirit of Commander, and then having a tutor on your commander could be very unfun for your playgroup depending on on what their stance is. That being said, Rebel is a very bad creature type. If you look at all the Rebels, they're bad. They're really, really bad. They're old cards. They're totally understated for what they cost, and they kind of define themselves over being all tutors. Every Rebel gets to tutor for another Rebel, pretty much. There is 2 things I want to say about that. First of all, keep this in mind because we have gotten some Rebels recently. Notably, the Phyrexia All Will Be One had a rebellion going on, so we got some Rebels. Those aren't good, but whenever you see a Rebel, think of Lyn Civi. And then, noticeably, Cho-Manno, Revolutionary, is a Rebel. It has a decent ability, so maybe something you could do with that. One last note on that commander: if you somehow manage to turn every creature in your deck into a rebel, this just gets to tutor for any creature in your deck. Mageta the Lion, a 5 mana 3/3 from, I believe it's Prophecy. Very bad set, terrible creatures pretty much all around. This, however, is a cycle that is quite interesting. Every creature in this cycle allows you to discard 2 cards from your hand, tap, pay some mana, and then you get an effect. In Mageta's case, for 4 mana, tap, discarding 2 cards from your hand, you get to destroy all creatures except for Mageta. Those creatures can't be regenerated. Regenerated, obviously not as relevant anymore because it's kind of realized it's not a fun keyword. Man, having a board wipe on a creature It's kind of sick, is it not? Also, discarding 2 cards can be interesting in a maybe Reanimator type deck. It also warps how all the players around you play the game, probably, because they don't want to run into your telegraphed board wipe. Get going, get creative. Next, my goodness. I was so excited when I saw this card. Masako the Humorless. Yeah, she's not fun for your opponents. 3 mana, 2/1, human advisor. Advisor, interesting creature type. Human, very generic, obviously. Masako, as we would nowadays say has flash, so you can play it anytime you could play an instant. Tapped creatures you control may block as though they were untapped. What a crazy line of text. I think we get nowadays a lot of creatures that say creatures you control have vigilance. Vigilance is a keyword that is very common and very good. This is not good vigilance. This is way more of a fake out. If this isn't your commander, then you get to just completely obliterate someone, probably blocking with your tapped creatures that you just swung at them with. If this is your commander, then maybe they can't really attack you, even though they know, like, or especially because they know, they just can't attack you. And as we've seen, we sometimes like our creatures to get tapped. Vigilance, of course, is better in most cases, but in some cases, it's pretty good to have tapped creatures. Mavinda, Student's Advocate, a new card, Strixhaven, not that long ago. God, 2021 is 3 years ago, my goodness. This bird advisor has a very cool, interesting, unique ability. It's a flying 2/3, nothing special, nothing to write home about. For 0 mana, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more to cast this way. And then of course, safety first, if that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only once each turn. 0 cost abilities are always interesting. Unfortunately, we only get to activate it once. First glance, this reminds me completely of something like Feather, as in you just get to spell sling a bunch of instants and sorceries. What piqued my interest is it doesn't really require you to play spells that target creatures. Of course, that's preferred, but this feels like getting a weird restriction by your parents and you finding a loophole. Just think of cards like Vanquished Horde, which have cost reduction stapled onto them. You get to cast those. It's gonna be extremely expensive, but it's not unusual for commander board states to have 20 creatures. You know, there's always this one squirrel token deck. For still just 2 mana, you get to cast Vanquish the Horde from your graveyard. I know, I'm biased. Another Kamigawa card. Michiko Konda, Truth Seeker. 4 mana human advisor. Again, an advisor. Maybe there's an advisor deck out there. It's a 2/2. Nothing to write home about. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, that player sacrifices a permanent. This doesn't work with Goad. This doesn't work with Ajani. Gideon, we've seen earlier. But there's soft ways to make your opponents attack you. There's stuff like becoming the Monarch. Everybody wants to hit the Monarch. They want to be the Monarch. So maybe a commander for your Pillow Fort deck, where you make it really, 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 really painful to take the Monarch from you? Who knows? Kind of a double whammy. It's Audric, Lunarch Marshal. I mean, I think this one is pretty well known. It's keyword soup.commander. It just gives all or most of the keywords that are relevant to all of your creatures. I wanted to point out specifically Skulk, since it's kind of unblockable, but you can't block, which can be extremely potent. And of course, Double Strike, Lifelink. There's so many useful things. And I think Keyword Matters is a very fun type of deck to play. But there's another object that I also found to be quite interesting. This one makes our good friend Jarkeld look kind of silly. 3/4 first strike. Whenever Audric attacks with at least 3 other creatures, you choose which creatures block and how those creatures block. Notably, it can't do anything during 2 other players interacting in combat, like Jarkeld can. But all in all, this seems to be a lot more powerful. Note that you can just say none of your creatures block, and all of your creatures are pretty much unblockable. Note that you can just kill their Birds of Paradise by making it block, if they're not careful, I guess. So this is kind of removal, kind of unblockable for all of your creatures. It's an interesting card. Maybe more for the 99 than as a commander. Although I think this makes a pretty good commander also. Opal-Eye Kondas Yojimbo. I just keep going on and on about those Kamigawa cards, but they're pretty cool. 3 mana, 1/4. Fox Samurai, 2 mostly irrelevant creature types. Bushido 1, irrelevant ability. Defender, not a good ability. Off to a terrible start. Tap. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage this turn, that damage is dealt to Opal-Eye instead. 2 mana, prevent the next one damage that would be dealt to Opal-Eye this turn. Now I think it's really that middle paragraph that we should focus on. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage this turn, that damage is dealt to Opal-Eye instead. If I understand this correctly, this could negate a Blasphemous Act, but there's also so much more interesting stuff you could do it. This becomes a lot more powerful if you, for example, get to untap your commander every turn, and you just get to blank one creature every single time. This of course also gets better if it has indestructible, or if you get life for every point of damage it is dealt. I'm pretty sure there is a way to go infinite with this. I haven't found it. Maybe you will. A weaker one that I found to be quite cool nonetheless. Radiant Archangel, don't let the layout fool you. This is a very, very old card. 5 mana, 3/3, vigilance and flying, as is common for angels. It has a symmetrical effect because it's old. It gets +1 for +1/+1 for each other creature with flying on the battlefield. This counts your opponent's flying creatures. Maybe they have flying spirit tokens that you gave them. It's not a very strong card. I'm gonna be very clear here. Still, if you really like angels but you don't want to play the typical angels, or if you really like flying and you don't like the flying commanders, this could be an alternative for you. It could just be for the 99. Maybe you don't play it at all because it's bad. I thought it looked cool. It feels cool. It reads cool. Deserved a spot on the list. Next one, a bit more controversial. Not a bad card, but an obnoxious one. Rune-Tail Kitsune Ascendant. When you have 30 or more life, flip Rune-Tail Kitsune Ascendant. Very innocuous until you realize you start with 40 life in Commander. Talk to your playgroup about it, because the effect that it gets once it flips is very powerful. It becomes an enchantment, very hard to remove compared to a creature. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to creatures you control. Crazy line of text. Get wild. At this point, I almost feel like apologizing. Another card from Kamigawa. 2 mana, Sensei Golden-Tail. It's a 2/1, not great. It has Bushido 1, also not great. 2 mana tap, put a training counter on target creature. That creature gains Bushido 1 and becomes a samurai in addition to its creature types. Play this ability only anytime you could play a sorcery. You get to turn stuff into samurais. Why would you want to do this? Don't really know. It's interesting, however, that those creatures stay samurai even after Sensei Golden-Tail leaves. So maybe you run this in your samurai deck and turn those good creatures that you have to run because samurai are horrible into samurai. It is interesting that just something like Stoneforge Masterworks becomes infinitely better because all of your creatures will always stay samurai. Interesting effect in my opinion. Unfortunately, it's stapled onto samurai, but you know, if you love samurai, or if you find a good way to break all your creatures having the same creature type, even if it comes on a 2 mana tap ability, maybe that's your next favorite deck. A flying commander that is a lot more powerful and that everybody probably knows is Sephara Sky's Blade. 7 mana angel, 7/7, flying lifelink, other creatures you control with flying have indestructible. So far, so boring. But you may pay 1 white and tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying, rather than pay this spell's mana cost. As I've said before, having your commander on the battlefield in a game of Commander is more fun than not having it. This, in a way, gets around commander decks. I mean, of course it doesn't, but paying 3 mana, because you just pay 1 white and a commander tax, for an effect as strong as this, that's acceptable. Paying 5 mana to get this effect, still acceptable. And heck, even paying the 7 mana that the creature actually costs, still acceptable. You get a very powerful effect, and you get to have it often. And I think that's a very good characteristic for your commander to have. Next one, horrible. And again, you know, Kamigawa, kind of a guilty pleasure. Takeno, Samurai General. Now here's your payoff for having Bushido and having Samurai. 6 mana 3/3. Horrible stats. Human Samurai, Bushido 2. Wow, Bushido 2. Each other Samurai, so it doesn't even profit from its own Bushido really. You control gets +1/+1 for each point of Bushido it has. Man, what a bad card. What a cool effect though. I really like that it tries to turn Bushido, which is a bad ability, into something actually good. Because those creatures they don't lose Bushido. It doesn't alter the way Bushido works. You just get it on top. We're getting close to the end. Second to last. Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle. 4 mana 2/2 bird cleric. It has flying and a crazy line of text. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Remember, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. So mostly artifacts and to a certain degree legendaries we care about. Crazy. The fact that this doesn't trigger just once per turn means you can go crazy. The first thing I saw when I saw this card was, oh, this is just Scrap Trawler. This is artifact combo as a commander. Maybe there's something more creative. Maybe you run it in your low mana curve legendary deck, and this is just a way to recur cool legendary creatures. Who knows? Maybe you find something cooler. Now, usually you'd want to end this list with a banger, but honestly, since also this is just in alphabetical order, the last card is just such a doofus. What a weird card. Tividar of Thorn. It's a 3 mana human lord. Oh lord. 2/2. First strike, protection from red. So far, so boring. When this card comes into play, destroy target goblin. What? What is that line of text? Destroy target goblin? Why would I want to destroy a goblin? This guy hates goblins, by the way. There's a card, Tividar's Crusade. What the fuck is the artwork? Destroy all goblins for 3 mana. Maybe those 2 cards are the missing pieces to your Rasputin deck. Right? That guy gives 1/1 goblins to each opponent. What an efficient way to kill them. And that's it. That was the last one, at least for mono white. I think you can look forward to the other mono colors at least. And yeah, maybe we'll go through all the color combinations. Feel free to, in the comments, tell me if any of these cards were of interest to you. If you ended up building decks around any of these commanders, if you ended up putting any of them in your deck. Because ultimately that's what this is about. I just wanted to share my passion, and I hope I see some passion from you. Enjoy your days or nights, wherever you are.